Hello, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to ROM Storytime. And as you can see, I have another new friend that I've brought with me. This is my friend, Julie. Everybody say hi, Julie.
Hi.
And Julie, would you like to introduce yourself and tell our Storytime friends who you are?
Sure. When I'm at the museum, I am one of the teachers. And so I take the museum objects and what students are learning in school, and magic happens. Other than that, I'm many other things, but relevant for today, I am a mom, and one of my kids is a little bit like the child in the story we're about to read today.
Yay! And I'm so excited that we get to share this story with you today, everybody. So, Julie, I'm actually going to take you away for a second so that I can show our friends what our book is. It is From the Stars in the Sky to the Fish in the Sea by Kai Cheng Thom. It's illustrated by Wai-Yant and Ching, and I want to say a huge thanks to Arsenal Pulp Press for giving us permission to read this story today. All right, so I'm going to bring Julie back. And I am going to adjust my camera. I've never had to do this before on Storytime, but this book is so long and the illustrations are absolutely beautiful. And I really kind of have to see both pages at once. So my webcam has to be up really, really high this time. And I think I've got it. So Julie, are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's take a look at From the Stars in the Sky to the Fish in the Sea. Hey everybody! Sorry to interrupt, it is Sarah from the future with an important message for you. Now, unfortunately, after the 2020 school year ends, we can't keep the read aloud portion of the Storytime in the Storytime broadcast, but don't worry, I've got something special for you. Now, in the meantime, we do encourage you to pick up a copy of this book. You can sign it out of your library. Get your grown-ups help to share your thoughts with us at ROM Toronto, #ROM at home, because we would love to hear what you think of this book. But in the meantime, here is Sarah's super fast Storytime Summary. Okay, so one day, when the sun and the moon are both in the sky, a baby's born. And because both the sun and the moon were out, the baby couldn't decide what to be, so it was a little bit of everything. Boy, girl, bird, fish, cat, rabbit, tree, star. And they looked pretty strange, but their mother loved them and named them Mulan, and sung that she'd love them always, and the baby felt loved. So Mulan grew up to be always changing depending on their mood and what they were doing, and on the first day of school, they went off in a tiger coat and peacock tail. They were so excited. But the kids at school were all boys and girls and didn't understand Mulan, and Mulan didn't know what to do. And the next day, they were all prickly, so the kids didn't bother them, but they still weren't happy. So the next day, they didn't wear any feathers or sparkles and played baseball with the boys. But when they went to play hopscotch with the girls, the very silly kids were all like, "Boys don't play hopscotch!" And then they were all, "Why are you different all the time? What are you supposed to be?" And Mulan yelled, "I don't know," and ran home. And Mulan's mom held them while they cried, because Mulan didn't understand why they had to decide to be just one thing. And Mom said, "It's not easy to be different from everyone else, but you can only be who you are," and sang the song again, letting them know that no matter what, Mom would love them always. And Mulan felt loved. And so the next day they went back to school with fur and feathers and scales and leaves and all the sparkles. And the kids were all, "You can fly? That's cool!" And the one boy that pulled Mulan's feathers apologized and admitted that they'd been a bit jealous. And Mulan showed all the other kids how to gallop like horses and climb like monkeys and swim like fish. And the child of fur, feathers, scales, leaves, and sparkles, who was neither boy nor girl, but many things and always changing, felt happy. And the mother still sings the song to Mulan every night. But Mulan is courageous and free now that everyone has learned to love them for who they are. Yay! What a great story! That story makes me so happy.
Me too.
Yay! And I like that once the kids learned how to love Mulan for who they are and not who they expect them to be, everybody had so much more fun.
Absolutely.
Yay! All right, so Julie and I were talking last night, everybody, and we were talking about some of the connections that this book has to the museum in a lot of different ways. So one of the things we thought was really cool is that Mulan goes through these really big changes in what they look like. And it's a little bit different, but kind of the same to something that we talk about all the time when we're teaching science in the biodiversity galleries. So, Julie, do you want to let our friends know what the word is that we use for a really big change?
Yes, and I'm sure at least some of you have heard this word before in science class. It is metamorphosis.
Yes. So we have a few examples of those that we talk about all the time. One of the big ones, especially for this time of year, is this animal right here. This is a monarch, and there was a time last year where on the second floor in the Earth Rangers studio, in the Shad Gallery, we were actually raising monarch caterpillars, and they were turning into butterflies, and this is an example of one of those days when it happened. So that's one example of metamorphosis. And this is another creature that we can find on the second floor that has a really big metamorphosis too. This is one of our mossy frogs.
Ribbit.
Julie, do you want to talk about the mossy frog metamorphosis?
Sure. So mossy frogs start off as little eggs, little balls of jelly. So we can tend to be a little egg. And then they come out of their egg and they're tadpoles, their little head with a tail. And then over time, they grow some legs. And I believe it starts with the
front legs.
Which ones?
Now I'm confused. Front legs, then back legs.
Front legs, then back legs. All right, so front legs, and then back legs, and they suck their tail up into themselves. And then they look like frogs.
Yay. Oh, it's been so long since I've seen them. It might be the other way. Oh, this is what happens when you're away from your mossy frog friends for 3 months. So sometimes we'll do our little mossy frog interpretive dance too, which is kind of a faster version of what we just did. You start off as an egg, and then you hatch, and then you do some jazz hands to the back, and then you do some jazz hands to the front when you go your front legs, and then you absorb your tail, and then you hop away as a frog.
Hop, hop.
So there are lots of examples in that gallery of many, many different creatures across the world who have different things on their bodies that help say things about who they are. And that was the inspiration for our creativity challenge this week. So friends, if you have any questions about the story that we read this week or about metamorphosis, big changes, you can start putting that in the chat now. And while you are doing that, let's take a look at our creativity challenge this week.
In From the Stars in the Sky to the Fish in the Sea, Mulan changes a lot depending on how they're feeling. But every aspect of their appearance, from fur and feathers to stripes and sparkles, are part of who they are and what makes them special. At the ROM, there are lots of examples of living things that go through a big change in what they look like. The word that scientists use for a really big change is metamorphosis. Like when our monarch caterpillars became butterflies, or our tadpoles turn into mossy frogs. Even upstairs, we see evidence of a big change in someone's appearance. When Queen Hatshepsut became pharaoh, some of her statues show her wearing a queen's dress and crown, but other statues show her wearing the headdress, kilt, and beard that were worn by the male pharaohs before her. We even have an example of a sphinx with the body of a lion and the face of Hatshepsut. For our creativity challenge this week, we're going to go through our own metamorphosis and take inspiration from nature to find the shape that really represents us, just like Mulan in our story. Research plants and animals from nature, like in the ROM's online collections, and find things that resonate with you. Print out or sketch these examples of fur, feathers, quills, shells, stripes, or spots. Find or copy a picture of yourself and cut out your face from the photo. Place your face on a good background. Glue or draw your nature examples around your face, or combine the two, until you have a collage that shows off your metamorphosis. Add other materials like leaves, feathers, flowers, and other examples from nature to really make your transformation shine. Don't forget the sparkle. Take a photo of your transformation and share it with us at ROM Toronto, #ROM at home.
All right, so that is our creativity challenge this week. Finding inspiration to go through your own metamorphosis to show people something about you, something that says who you are. And I'm just looking at the chat, and Skits was saying that it was a gorgeous story, and I absolutely agree. This was one of my favorite stories from Storytime, and I'm so glad that we got the chance to share it. And Julie, Skits has an amazing question, and I'm very, very happy about this question. So, are there any animals that change between boys and girls, or are both and neither at the same time?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we have a great example of that at the museum in our coral reef tank in the Shad Gallery for Biodiversity. So many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the clownfish or the anemone fish. And when they come out of their eggs, they're neither male nor female. And they will swim around and find an anemone, which is a place for them to live, a thing with tentacles. And they have a nice symbiotic relationship with those animals.
You can see it in the picture that's up on the screen right now.
Yeah. And if they get there, if they find an anemone and there is no other clownfish already living there, then they will turn into a female, and that they're kind of in charge of the anemone. And if they do get there and there's already some other clownfish living there, then they will become males. Now, if anything should happen to the female, say she gets eaten, or she just dies of natural causes or something, then the biggest male that is living in that anemone will turn into a female, and the next biggest male will become its partner.
So that is an example of metamorphosis that's really different from all the other kinds that we usually talk about, but it's a really, really cool one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens in lots of different kinds of fishes. It's not just clownfishes. And I understand why Disney left this out, but...
So you have to spend a lot of time explaining that.
Yeah, that would have been a bit of a distraction from the main plot. But in Finding Nemo, when Pearl was the mother's name, right? Mm-hmm. When she gets eaten, Marlin, the dad, would actually have turned into a female if it was real life in the oceans. And later in life, as if Nemo's dad had moved on, then Nemo himself would have turned into a female to be in charge of that anemone.
So this is one of the examples about how cool nature is. There is so much out there. So I'm going to show another example that we like to talk about. And I'm going to move so you can still see me. So this is our Savanna and Grassland display on the second floor. And in that display on the... what side of it is on the right-hand side on your screen is a lion. And when I'm teaching with our younger friends, they'll look at that lion and be like, oh, it's a lioness. And Julie, can you guess why they think it's a lioness?
No mane.
Yes. But there is an example of a lioness called Mamoriri in Africa who actually grew a mane. And she does some of the things that lionesses traditionally do, like hunting and hanging out with the other lionesses and having lioness time. But she also does some of the things that male lions traditionally do, like defending the pride from hyenas. So she's a little bit like Mulan in the story. She's kind of in between. And this is one of my favorite things. Julie has heard me talk about this so much. But one of my favorite things about nature is, like humans, we like to put things in categories, which makes sense because that helps us survive. Like if we were early humans looking at a bunch of mushrooms and I picked up one mushroom and went, Julie, I'm going to eat this mushroom. Nom, 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 nom. Julie, what would you think about that mushroom?
I would put it in the category of bad mushroom, don't eat.
Yes. So categories help us survive as a human species, but nature hates categories. There's a lot of things that are generally true when you're talking about nature, Skits remembers the story about the main lioness, which is so cool. Yeah, Skits. Yeah, but nature always has exceptions, and that is the coolest thing. And we're discovering them all the time, too, which is another great thing about living at the museum is we're teaching about stuff all the time, but we're also learning all the time. There's always new things coming in.
There's always a platypus.
Yeah, there's always a platypus. Skits would like to know what we would change into if we could, like grow wings or tentacles or stuff like that. It's a great question, right?
Yeah.
I gotta say,
pretty handy.
Yeah. I gave myself a peacock tail in the artwork because they're just so cool and so pretty, and also a really great way of saying either like, hey, check me out, or hey, back off, I'm scary and I'm not feeling like interacting with you today, which, depending on my mood, is something that I need. But I gotta say, wings. I gotta fly. That would be so cool.
If I could commute through the air rather than on a train, I think that would be really fantastic.
So nice, good exercise, to get to see the city, no gridlock. Oh, that would be so cool. All right, so there was something else that we wanted to talk about too, especially, and it was mentioned a little bit in the creativity challenge, but I've got a picture up on screen of the Galleries of Africa, Egypt on the 3rd floor. And this is a part of the galleries toward the back in the corner, and it's a wall. And on this wall is the Pharaoh Hatshepsut. And she is one of my favorite pharaohs because she is just really, really cool. Julie, do you want to talk about her a bit, or do you want me to do it?
Go for it. You know more than I do.
All right. So Hatshepsut was the pharaoh in her own right. And originally, when she first came to power, statues of her show her in what were typically worn by queens in Egypt. So she had the queen's dress and the queen's crown. There were specific crowns for specific people. But when she became pharaoh, her statues start showing her in the kilt that the pharaohs would wear, and the headdress that the pharaohs would wear, and the fake beard that the pharaohs would wear as well. So she presented herself as female sometimes, and she presented herself as male sometimes. Again, depending on her mood and what message she was trying to convey. And there were other female pharaohs in Egypt before her, but she was the first one who did that. And I just find that really, really cool. Yeah.
Yay.
Skits. Skits is talking about flying, getting the fresh air, and doing things that I can't say in the chat on people below. Oh, Skits, you're great. Oh, man. Yeah, and it's really neat because there's examples of this. So Elise wants to know if she was the only one who became pharaoh and if it was common. So it wasn't common, but she was definitely not the only one. And here's where it gets a little bit fuzzy, because typically a lot of what we know about ancient Egypt, the scholars were from a particular class of people who had a particular viewpoint, and a lot of times when we look at history, we have to keep in mind who is telling us about this history, because a lot of the knowledge was lost. We had to figure out what the hieroglyphs said. There was the Rosetta Stone that let us do that, which was great, but the people who were finally translating all this stuff were filtering it through the lens of what they knew. So they're actually going back and looking at a lot of female rulers of Egypt before Hatshepsut and after, who traditionally, the histories say like, oh, this was the queen or the queen regent and waiting for this other person. And now they're actually reevaluating them and saying, oh, no, I think they might have actually been the pharaoh. But people just didn't think of that because at the time, especially when people really started to get interested in Egypt in Europe, they wouldn't think of a female being pharaoh. That was just not a thing. Elise is saying like monks in the Middle Ages. But yeah. Yep. So as we go through history, especially, and this is why it's so important to have different people looking at these histories from different backgrounds and different cultures, because you start to see things that other people might have missed. Another really good example was what Christian and I talked about with the hair archaeologist. So she was a hairstylist who figured out that, oh, everybody who said those really amazing hairstyles on the Roman statues could only be wigs, she's like, no, I style hair. That's possible. You just have to sew it. And did it. And that's why it's so great to have different people looking at history.
Yeah, because I imagine, unless you're doing a lot of fancy hairstyles, you're not considering sewing hair in place.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly was wowed when I did that.
No, it's really cool. Skits is saying, like, the Vikings and people originally thinking only guys were Vikings, but now people thinking that there were also women Vikings. Yeah. And this is a really cool thing throughout history. I mean, the thing that we find out about history is people go to people. So, again, like with nature, there's always exceptions, and there always have been. And a lot of times, especially in history, they didn't get talked about if you were different from what everyone considered normal. But now, you know, we're starting to get past that and realizing that it's about valuing people for who they are rather than who we think they're supposed to be. Just like Milan in our story. Yay.
Yeah, and everyone had fun when they accepted Milan.
Exactly, because Milan taught them things that they had never even considered before, and they let them find parts of themselves that they had never considered either, which I think is one of my favorite parts of that story.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we have the other really cool thing about Hatshepsut. So this wall that is up on our screen right now is a wall that depicts her voyage to Punt, and they're not really sure where that was. But Hatshepsut was one of the longest reigning pharaohs. She was one of the most productive pharaohs. She did all of these advances in trade. She did all of these advances in construction. And her trade voyage to Punt brought things to Egypt that hadn't been there before. It's just like super, super cool. And then down in the corner is the Sphinx that has the body of a lion and the head of Hatshepsut. And that actually reminded me a little bit of the creativity challenge this week, which I had done without even considering that Sphinx. But the Sphinx is kind of like Mulan, and it's kind of like our creativity challenge this week too.
Nice.
All right. So it looks like our chat is slowing down a little bit. So I think it may be time to start wrapping it up a little bit. So friends, I'm not sure if you know that this is the... Ooh, did Hatshepsut get her own pyramid? No. So the pyramids were 3 specific pharaohs. Then there were kind of smaller pyramids that were other pharaohs. Hatshepsut didn't get her own pyramid, but she did get her own funerary temple. And the outside of that temple has her actually depicted as Osiris, who was the king of the Egyptian gods, and he ruled over the underworld. And so the statues of her outside are, again, her depicted as Osiris. So she's got the crown, she's got the beard, she has the staffs kind of crossed across her chest. It's really, really cool. And very large. And awesome. So, yeah, unfortunately, this is our very last ROM Storytime live, which, yeah, does make me sad. But you don't have to say goodbye completely. So at the bottom of the screen is rom.ca/storytime, rom.on.ca/storytime. That on is important. And all of the story times are still going to live there. The only thing is that because of permission reasons, we can't keep the read aloud portion of the story in. So if you think anybody needs to hear this book, make sure that they watch this video today or tomorrow, because on Thursday I have to replace all of the read alouds with Sarah's super fast Storytime Summary, which are fun too, but it's good to hear the actual book. The only ones we get to keep are Burton and Isabel and The Day the Ocean Disappeared, because those are ROM books. But that doesn't mean we have to say goodbye completely. So down at the bottom is @RomToronto, #RomAtHome. You can still talk to us there. Me and Julie both pay attention to that tag. We will respond to you with any questions that you have. If you want to reread the books and talk about them, we are happy to talk about them with you. And if you have other books that you read that you think are related to the museum, be sure to share them with us, because we would really, really love to know. And the last thing that I want to do, because I forgot to do this last week, is shout out to Holly, who did the amazing Raccoon Queen comic for us, which was so great. And I forgot to shout her out last week because there was so much amazing stuff going on with our Inuktitut lesson, but we were really, really happy that she did that for us. Yeah, Elise, so sad. I am so sad too. I will miss everybody so much, but you can still get in touch with me. You can still correspond with me. I am still happy to make videos talking about museum stuff, and I know Julie is too, because that's what we love. We love sharing this stuff with you. Oh, Storytime has been absolutely amazing. Thank you all so much for it. Thank you, Skits, for being the best chat friends. So happy that all of my regular chat friends have come back each week to talk to us some more. Yay, Holly, for sure. So for the last time, everybody, take care of each other, keep reading, and we will see you again. Goodbye, everybody!